let's talk about something that sounds completely made up. A country that was born, lived, and died all in the span of a long weekend. No, seriously, it really happened. We're about to unpack the absolutely wild and kinda tragic story of a nation that existed for just 3 days before it was completely wiped off the map.
Yep, that's the number. 72 hours. From the moment they declared independence with all this hope to the moment foreign troops had occupied every last inch of it, its entire life as a sovereign nation fits into just 3 days. So the big question is, how on earth does that even happen? How does a nation's dream get so utterly crushed so fast? Well, to figure that out, we have to jump in our time machine and go back to one of the most chaotic moments in European history.
So our story really kicks off in a Europe that's basically a powder keg waiting to explode. And the only reason our little 3-day country could even exist for a moment is because a much bigger, much more established country was literally falling apart at the seams: Czechoslovakia.
Okay, let's zoom in on the map. We're focusing on this one specific place, Carpatho-Ukraine. It's this mountainous, tucked-away region in the far east of Czechoslovakia. It had its own culture, its own identity, and for a long, long time, it had been promised it could have some self-rule. A promise that never really came through.
And what's just wild is how fast everything unraveled. The real nail in the coffin was the Munich Agreement in 1938, where other big European powers basically let Hitler carve up Czechoslovakia. After that, the government in Prague had no real power left. In all that chaos, Carpatho-Ukraine finally got its autonomy, but just a few months later, Slovakia split off and declared independence. And poof, Czechoslovakia as a country was gone. A giant power vacuum just opened right up.
And you have to understand, the situation on the ground was complicated. This region was a total mosaic of different peoples. You had Ukrainians and Ruthenians, who were the majority, and were starting to see this chaos as their one big shot at freedom. But you also had neighboring Hungary, which was looking at this territory and saying, hey, that used to be ours. The stage was totally set for a showdown.
And that brings us right to the main event. With their parent country gone and Nazi Germany making moves everywhere, the leaders in Carpatho-Ukraine decided it was now or never. They were going to make a stand.
So they scrambled to form a government, and the man who stepped up as president was Avgustyn Voloshyn. This guy was a priest and an educator, a real passionate advocate for his people. He and everyone else in his new government knew the odds were, well, they were terrible. But they felt they had to take this one shot at making history.
So on March 15, 1939, they made it official. For one brief, shining moment, the Republic of Carpatho-Ukraine was real. It had a name, a president, a flag, and this powerful, desperate hope to just exist. It was the dream, finally coming true.
But here is the absolutely brutal reality of the situation. That dream was born in a world that just wasn't listening. Not one, not a single other country on Earth officially recognized their independence. Carpatho-Ukraine was completely, totally on its own. And that made it a perfect target.
And that vulnerability, well, it was exploited pretty much instantly. The celebrations didn't last long. In fact, that dream was about to turn into a full-blown nightmare.
Get this. At the very same time President Voloshyn was making that historic declaration, Hungarian troops were already storming across the border. No warning, no time to get ready. The invasion literally began on day 1 of the country's existence.
And the fight, well, you can't even call it a fight. It was impossible. On one side, you have the Carpathian Sich, basically a militia of about 2,000 volunteers, many of them just students with not much more than basic rifles. On the other side, a professional army of 40,000 soldiers with tanks, artillery, planes, the whole shebang. It wasn't a battle, it was a steamroller. And here it is, the entire, brutal, blink-and-you'll-miss-it life of a country. Day 1, they declare independence, and the invasion begins almost simultaneously. Days 2 and 3, you see these small pockets of unbelievably brave but hopeless resistance from the Sich, fighting for a country that was already disappearing. And by March 18th, it was all over. The Hungarians controlled everything. The Republic of Carpatho-Ukraine was gone. So a country that lasts just 72 hours gets swallowed by its neighbor right as World War II is about to kick off. You can see why it kind of became a footnote, right? But its legacy, what it stood for, is actually way more important than how long it lasted. The immediate aftermath was, well, it was grim. The land was officially annexed by Hungary. President Voloshyn and what was left of his government had to flee for their lives. And those brave defenders from the Sich,
They were captured or killed. The dream was just stamped out.
So why should we even remember this tiny 3-day republic? Well, because it was one of the first really powerful screams for an independent Ukrainian state in the 20th century. It was also, tragically, a perfect preview of the chaos to come in World War II, a world where big countries would just eat smaller ones. It's a raw lesson in just how brutal geopolitics can be. But more than anything, it's this incredible story of a people who stood up and defied the odds, even when those odds were completely and totally impossible.
And all of this leaves you with this one big, lingering question. If a nation declares to the world, we exist, but no one else is around to listen or to care, did it ever really exist at all? It's a question that echoes all the way from 1939 to the world we live in today.